Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the top. Continue on with Masikim and Kshafim in the Indian that we were discussing before. Amrei Shlakish Arbat Vorim Ho'isan Adam B'Reish. 4 things, if a person does them, he endangers his life, and he's responsible. He's considered to be negligent. One who relieves himself between a palm tree and a wall. If one passes between 2 palm trees. And one who drinks borrowed water. And one who passes over spilled water. And even if his wife spilled it out in front of him. So now the Gemara will elaborate on these items that Rish Lakish mentioned, but in general terms, as we'll see, in general terms, is that the Mazikin they don't frequent areas where people are around, and they're not where there's a derech rishus harabim, where there's a path in the street. Then the Mazikin aren't there. So the place that they go to is on the side of a road, or the place that they go to is between a road and a tree. Now, if a person goes there, he's so to speak, infringing on their territory, and therefore they'll harm him. If he goes in the areas where they don't frequent, they won't harm him. So that's one area that they frequent. The Mazikin frequent the children, the young children. So therefore, there is a sakana over there as well. So the Gemara will elaborate. If one relieves himself between a palm tree and a wall, that's only if there's not a space of 4 amas between the palm tree and the wall. But if there's a space of dalet amas, then it's not mentioned such a case. Meaning, if there's not a space of dalet amas, then that's the area for the mazikin, and therefore they'll harm him for infringing on their territory. But if there's a space of dalet amas, then the mazikin have enough space for them to pass, and therefore they won't harm the person. And even if there's no arbas laram, that's only if there's no other path. That was the only path for travel. But if there is another path for the mazikin to use, then it's not mentioned over there. Because if he blocks their only available path, then they'll harm him. But if there's another path, they won't. They call him if a person passes between 2 palm trees. More says, that's not only if a Rishus Harabim doesn't pass through. But if the Rishus Harabim passes through, so as we mentioned, the Mazikim don't frequent an area where there are people. They don't frequent an area where there's a Rishus Harabim. So if the Rishus Harabim passes between the trees, that's not their area, and they won't harm a person who is there. He drinks borrowed water, it's only if it was borrowed by a cotton, because the mazikin, they frequent themselves with young children. But if it's a gadol, it's not mentioned. And even if a cotton, a minor borrowed, that's only in the field, where there's no other water available. So therefore, that's where they will go to that water. Water is not readily available. But in the city where water is readily available, they'll go to other sources, so it's not a problem. And even in the field, we only mention this then by water. But by wine and beer, that's not the case. Mazikin don't drink wine and beer. They don't hover over wine and beer. If a person passes over spilled water, that's only if earth wasn't thrown on, or saliva wasn't spit onto it. However, if it was afsakina, if there was earth thrown on it, or saliva, less lenba. But that's only if the sun did not pass over the water. Or or 60 steps did not pass over it. But if the son did pass or over 60 steps did pass over it, then there's no sakana. It's only where he's not riding a donkey or wearing shoes. But if he's riding a donkey or wearing shoes, then it's not a concern because he's not coming into direct contact. But that's only in an area where it's not frequented by kishuv. But in a place where you have to be concerned that there's kishuv, and even if we have all of these conditions, there's still a concern because of the prevalence of kishuv. Like this Maisa, Kahu Gavra, a certain person, the Rachav Chamra, even though he was riding a donkey wearing shoes, the Gomen Masana Vitzavakar, his shoes shrank and his feet shriveled up because of the kishuv. Tanarabonon Shlish Einam Matzim V'loy Mismatzin. There are three that you don't pass between them, and you don't allow them to pass between two men. So ve'eluhein akela v'adekal v'ha'isha. So a dog, you don't pass between two dogs, and you don't let a dog pass between two men. You don't pass between two palm trees. Or a woman, you don't pass between two women, or a woman doesn't pass between two men. Some say even the chazer, even the snake. But if it did happen, and they did pass between what is the eitzah, what is the remedy? He says you begin the pasuk that says with kale, and you conclude it with kale. What is that? The pasuk says kale moitzim mitzrayim kisayav Yisrael loy kiloi nachash b'Yaakov loy kesam b'Yisrael ke'esei almer Yaakov l'Yisrael ma pal kale. So it begins and ends with kale, and the pasuk refers to that there's no kishuv. Kishuv does not affect Klal Yisrael, so it's a protection. That the pasuk says that the Rebbeinu Shalom protects us, that kishuv doesn't affect Klal Yisrael. So that's one pshadi. Nami niftach beloy v'nafsik beloy. Alternatively, with psukim of loy, which the pasuk says loy ish kel yechazav uven adam isnacham hu amar v'lo yasa ve'diber v'lo yikemena. So the pasuk that starts and ends with beloy. And if the pasuk is that Rebbeinu Shalom is that he's not a person that will be untruthful or unfaithful, meaning everything is in the hands of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Two people with an isha need to pass between them. If she's at the beginning of her nida cycle, she kills one of them. If she's at the end of it, then it causes a machlekes between the two of them. What is the eitzah? With the psukim of kel. Two women who were sitting on the Parshas Drachim, a fork in the road. One on one end of the road and one on the opposite side of the road. And they're facing each other, so we can assume that being Isaac and Kishuv. What's the eitzah? If there's another path, you should take a different path and not pass between them or pass on that road. If there's no other road, if there's another person with him, then they should hold hands together and then pass through. And if there's no other person with him, Agras, Aslas, Asya, Belusa. These are the name of Mazikin. So he mentions their names. He says that Miskat Labachei Kaval, they were killed with a crossbow, meaning so that instills fear in them. It's a lachash. If he encounters a woman that she's coming up from her tefillah of mitzvah, if he's the first one to be mishamish mitasai, it'll be possessed by a ruach of znus. And if she's the first one to be mishamish mitosa, to have relations, she will be overcome, possessed with the ruach of znus. My takanda would say eitz lemahachi shoich buz al nadivi v'yasem b'sayu loydarav. The pasuk says that he'll put embarrassment or humiliation on the noble ones, and it'll cause them to wander in a wasteland with derech, where there's no path, where there's no road. When I walk through the valley, when I walk in the valley that has a shadow of death, I won't have any fear because you are with me. This is it's referring to a case where a person sleeps in the shade of a single palm tree or in the shade of the moon. So that's considered to be a sakana. Now, when we say a single palm tree, that means that there's no other palm tree close enough that the shadow of the other one will fall on this one. But if there's another tree that's close enough by that its shadow will fall on this one, then it's not a concern. But we learned in the Braisa that if he sleeps in the shadow of Etzel Dekal Yechidi in a chaser, it says in a courtyard, or in the shade of the moon, Dama Baraisha, it's a sakon, he's taking his life in his hand. Hechidami, what is the case here? If we say that it's talking in a case where the shadow of the other tree did not fall on this tree, then I feel Nami should apply even the field as well. Because beforehand Rav Yitzchak did not differentiate between a chatzar and a sadeh. It must be, therefore, when it specifies chatzar, it means a chatzar, even it is close enough that the shade of another one is cast upon this one. But if it's in a chatzar, there still is a concern. And therefore, in a sadeh, if it's in a field, we say that in a field, if it's yechidi, it's a sakana, but if there's another one that's close enough that the shadow falls on, it's not a sakana. But in a chatzar, even in such a case, it is a sakana. Shmamina. Now, we said in the shadow of the moon, that's only if the shade is in the west, meaning it's at the end of the month when the moon is in the eastern sky, and therefore the shadow is cast to the west. But if it's in the east, meaning if it's at the beginning of the month when the moon is in the west and the shadow is cast to the east, then it's not a concern.